Hello, I'm Butch Curry from Zombie Nirvana Games. Welcome to the 12th episode of Fantasy Cartography with Adobe Photoshop, the podcast where I share my favorite tips, tricks, and techniques to help you make cool maps for your role-playing games. We finally reached the end of this particular map, and we've used a lot of different tools to get here. We've created custom patterns and brushes, used interesting filter combinations, dipped into our collection of fill and adjustment layers, and used a heck of a lot of layer masks. We've talked about color and ways to help you pick better colors, combine different layers to create our woodcut lake, and use the vector tools in some novel ways to create roads and buildings. In the last couple of episodes, we dove deep into the displace filter, and even used the uber Photoshop geek apply image tool. Now we're finally at a point where we can wrap this map up. What we really need to do now is just take a step back and give our map a good long look to see if there are any final tweaks it might need to make it look perfect. One of the keys to making a map in this particular style really work is subtlety. You want to make sure that none of your colors or effects are too strong or garish. For starters, I think I'd like to lighten up the color of the paper a bit. It looked good at the start, before we added any other elements to our map, but looking at it now it seems a little dark. Fortunately, because of the way we created our paper background in the first place, that's very easy to do. All we need to do is come over to our Layers palette, come down to our Paper folder, open that up, and double-click on the Hue Saturation layer that we created to colorize our paper background in the first place. That brings the Hue Saturation dialog back up, so we just slide the Lightness slider over a bit to the right, and hit OK. That looks much better. The next thing we want to take a look at is the opacity of our layers. With a map like this, it always helps to bring the opacity of some of your drawing layers down just a bit to allow some of that paper background to come through. We've already done that on a lot of our layers, but it doesn't hurt to just go back through and make sure that you've brought them all down to around 75–80% or so. I can see here that my lake is still at 100%, and if you take a look over here, you can see it looks a little bit darker than the buildings and roads. So we're just going to bring that down a bit, just to soften it. Right about there. It looks pretty good. One thing that I've learned from reading a lot of different books and watching a lot of podcasts about using Photoshop for digital photography is that a little extra contrast can often give your image quite a bit of oomph. If you think your image might need a little more contrast, here's a real easy way to do it that lets us use a tool we haven't used yet. We're going to come back over here to the Layers palette, and we're going to add a new layer up at the top. This time we're going to add a filler adjustment layer for curves. Now, I don't exactly have time to explain how curves work because it's fairly complicated. But the easy way to just add a little extra contrast is to come over here to the curves, make sure you have the path selected here, give a click right here, and a click right here. Then come back up here and select this one, and just move it up a bit. And select this one here and move it down. So you have a soft kind of S curve here, just a bare curve, and hit OK. And you can see how that's added a little more contrast into our image. It makes it look a little nicer. You can see that with and without. Just gives it a little more pop. If you think that looks maybe a little too strong, you can always come over here and bring the opacity down. Right about there. So now you can see with, without. Finally, let's say you have a black and white printer rather than a color one. You want to print out a copy of this, but you don't want to wear out your black ink cartridge by printing all of that stuff in the paper background. All you have to do is create a new layer. We'll come back down here to the paper layer and control-click on the paper layer mask. And then here on our new layer, we're just going to come up here to Edit and down to Stroke. We're going to give it about a 1 pixel stroke. That's going to be plenty big enough. And then Control-D to deselect. Now we can come back down here, hide the paper layer, come up here to the Trees folder, and hide the tree color. And now you can just print out a black and white version of this map without using up your black ink cartridge. It doesn't look as nice as our full color version, but it'll get the job done. And that's going to do it for this week and for this map. As I mentioned last week, I'm taking 2 weeks off of the podcast, but I'll be back on August 27th with new episodes posted every Monday. Don't forget to stop by zombienirvana.com for this week's show notes. And before I go back on the air, I'll be posting a sneak peek at Volume 1 of my Fantasy Cartography with Adobe Photoshop book, so keep an eye out for it. Until next time, thank you very much for listening, and happy mapping!
Will ye go, lassie, will you go?